You've assembled your TT250, but that's only half of the equation. In this video, we're going to be taking you through a series of adjustments and inspections so that your TT250 is not only reliable, but also safe before the ride. We're also going to take you through the startup and what it's like starting one of these for the very first time out of the crate. We've used a lot of tools along the way. Most of those tools will be what we use for these adjustments. One of our first checks is going to be that of the electrical system. But before we start that, we want to make sure that the ground wire is securely fastened. We're going to use an 8mm socket to do that. You'll see that the ground wire, which comes from the negative terminal on the battery, leads down to the top fastener on the front sprocket cover. I'm going to put that 8mm socket on there and just firm it up. Make sure that that's not loose. You always want to make sure that's securely fastened anytime the motorcycle is running. Now we're ready to check out the function of all of our lights in our 12-volt system. We're going to turn the ignition key on. The dash comes on. I see the neutral indicator light's on. It's in neutral. Headlight came on. High-low beam function. Passing lamp functions. Turn signals. Turn signals cancel by pushing the button in. Horn. Hazards. All the turn signals are flashing. I can see my tail light is on. I can see that the license plate light is on. I want to check my brake light function. Works. Check the foot brake. All right, great. So all of our lights are functioning properly. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. There are a few connections that are hidden on this bike. We've already looked at all of our headlight connections and all the wires that are behind that housing. Now I want to lift the tank up. This is something we do in the shop. You might decide not to do it up front, but basically it's checking the connections and plugs off your charging system. And that's going to require us to remove the side panels, the seat, and then loosen up the tank panels so that we can just raise the back end of the tank up a little bit to have access to those plugs. So we're going to look under the gas tank. There are a few electrical connections coming off the charging system. There are a few other electrical connections back here. We just want to make sure all those are securely fastened, that the plugs are connected fully, that the wires are matching, they're lined up, color coordinated. Each of those is secure, bullet connectors. Make sure that each wire is securely clicked into the connector. While we're in this area, we're going to put the fuel tank back down. Yours might come with the fuel line connected. If not, you can connect it at this time. Verify that there are no kinks in the hose. You want to make sure that those hoses flow smoothly and you're going to get good fuel to the carburetor. While we have the seat and the side panel off, we can of course check those electrical connections. We also want to zip tie the line. This is the wire coming from the brake switch for the brake light. We want to make sure that that's securely fastened. I've seen these actually get down and get burned on the tire. Also, we want to make sure that this hose going to the reservoir for the rear brake is not touching the exhaust system. So we might zip tie that just out of the way, helps clean things up. And you can also take a peek down in your air box. Just make sure there's no plastic or debris that's down in there on top of the filter. Of course, all these engines come shipped with the correct amount of oil in there. Anywhere between the half and the top of this sight gauge are good when the bike's standing upright and not running. And you can see I can even lean it over just a little bit and it rises up. So you want it just standing up straight level, and you can check that oil level. Now that we've made inspections on all of our electrical, we've ensured that the ground wire is securely fastened, we've attached the battery, we've even put fuel in the tank. We're ready to start it up. This is the initial startup for this motorcycle. We wanted you to see exactly what we go through in the shop when we're first starting one up. We're going to be turning the ignition on, the run switch is on, the fuel's on, and we have a startup procedure for this motorcycle. But more importantly, I wanted to point out, you'll probably see a lot of smoke burning off. These fumes are coming off of a packing grease that's on the engine, that's on the exhaust. This motorcycle's new. They cover it in oils so that it does not corrode during shipment. So you'll see some of that needs to be burned off before you actually want to put a helmet on and go riding. Let's see what happens. And as you can hear, it's running pretty rough. It's really tight right now. That engine's new, and the idle's gonna be low. A lot of times up front, we need to adjust that idle speed. It died out. I didn't let it warm up long enough. I'm gonna turn that idle. Ideally, you would adjust the idle speed once it's at running temperature. I already know I can turn it maybe half a turn right now to increase that right up from the start. A lot of times from the factory, they come a little bit low. I'm gonna start it again. You saw me pretty quickly get off of the choke and kind of nurse that throttle, take it through some revs to hold the RPMs up. Let's see what we've got. Here come the fumes. As it heats up, you're going to see more and more smoke coming off this machine. Definitely want to make sure you're doing this in a well-ventilated area. It will gas you out. You know, that engine's brand new. All the internal components are really tight, so it does take a little bit of effort to keep this thing going up front. Once the engine breaks in, you put 1,500 miles on this machine, it's completely different. It's more responsive, it sounds better. But that initial startup in particular is going to be a little more difficult of a start. So just bear with it, be patient, let it fully warm up, and then kind of see where your idle speed is. I don't want to adjust that idle up too high or it'll end up running very high once it warms up. But it's starting to warm up, it can hold an idle by itself now. So we'll let things go for just a moment, kind of take it through a heat cycle. And then now that we have it running, an important check we can make is of the charging system. I'm going to put a voltmeter on this. This is a 12-volt battery, a 12-volt system. But while this machine is running, it's probably putting out over 14 volts, maybe even 14 and a half at peak. I want to see where that peak is to make sure the regulator is doing just what it should, regulating that voltage. It's not getting too much, but I also want to make sure that it is rising so that it can charge the battery and keep everything running at the same time. Okay, so at idle, I'm getting a little over 13, somewhere between 13 and 14 volts. I'm going to give a little twist of the throttle. Watch that increase, let it kind of creep up. I want to see where the peak is. All right, so it looks like we're topping out around 14.43. That's perfect for this machine. As I mentioned, anywhere between 13 and a half, 14 and a half, you're good. If you're getting over 15 volts, that's a little too much for the system. If it's just for a brief moment, no problem, but if it continues to increase, you're overcharging things. That's just a quick check that we can make up front, verify that the charging system's working and that it's not going to overcharge. And you can hear we've got a slightly higher idle now, so it's staying just above 14 volts. It's got a nice strong alternator on this machine, which is great, so you can put those accessories on there. I believe it's 300 watts if I'm not mistaken, so really good machine, very versatile. Now the TT250 is a small displacement single cylinder engine. It's rigidly mounted, so we're getting all kinds of vibrations off of this machine. It's a workhorse, so it'll take the load. It'll take what you throw at it. But we want to make some checks on it, particularly of the torque values on all the fasteners. We're going to be looking at things like the exhaust. We're going to be looking at the engine mounts, your brake, both your brake systems, the mounts on those. That front, when we initially installed the front wheel, we torqued that down and used Loctite, but we want to check the rear. We might even need to make an adjustment on that rear. We're going to check the chain out, make sure the chain tension is correct, make sure the choke cable tension is correct. There's that happy medium place in there. So let's get to it. So on these first checks, we're going to be using a 12 millimeter socket, checking those engine mounts, the front engine mounts. Just making sure that all those nuts are securely tightened. Top engine mounts. We're going to use a 12 millimeter wrench on the exhaust nuts. Make sure that they have some kind of torque on them. That's one of those fasteners that over time, that's a periodic check that you can make. That's just routine maintenance, verifying that it goes through those heat cycles, and that's a point on any motorcycle. You can almost always add just a little bit of torque. You don't want to overdo it and snap your stud, but you can always put a little torque on those. We're going to check the rear exhaust mount. That's with the 12 socket. The rear brake calipers, that 12 millimeter as well. And now let's pay a little more close attention to the rear brake and any adjustments that might need to be made to the brake lever itself. We're looking at the rear brake lever, and I'll notice there's no play in that. As soon as I'm moving it, it's applying pressure to the master cylinder. And that's because that stops down just a little bit too low. It's not allowing it to come back and fully retract and take all the pressure off the master cylinder. So he's going to use a 10 millimeter to adjust that. It's got the two locking nuts on either side of that bolt. So essentially we're moving that bolt upwards so that this rear lever can come up just a little bit more and have a little play without actually applying pressure to the master cylinder. What would happen if it stayed in that position? You're going to end up with a hot caliper, and it's going to lock up that rear wheel. The brake pads will stick to that rear wheel if it's got constant pressure. We've got a little bit of wiggle now before I can feel that pump activating. We're going to use an 8 millimeter just to verify that the master cylinder is torqued down properly. And if you ever needed to adjust the angle of that rear brake lever, you can do so here. That's a 12 millimeter locking nut, and just adjust that shaft up or down to raise or lower the brake pedal. Ours is in a good position right now. Another check we want to make is that of the chain adjustment. I can see very quickly that that's too tight. They're asking for 15 millimeters of free play. If it's too tight, it's putting a lot of pressure on that counter shaft coming out of the transmission. If it's too loose, it could throw itself off and you're going to wear out your sprockets prematurely. So we're going to adjust that chain by loosening up the axle nut. We're using a 19 millimeter socket to do that. If you needed to hold the axle steady on the other side, that's an 18 millimeter wrench that would hold that. And then we're going to use our 13 millimeter wrench to actually make the adjustment. You've got one lock nut on the back of that swing arm and one adjusting nut. And there's one on each side. So another thing we want to verify is that tire is sitting in square in the swing arm. It's straight. So any adjustment we make, we're going to do it consistent on both sides. There are some lines, and we do have a video that shows in depth on how to adjust your chain, how to install a chain, how to change out that rear sprocket. That's always a great upgrade for anybody who's going to be riding their TT on the street or on the highways. We've got a 47 tooth, that's my favorite. We've even got a 45 tooth sprocket if you were only riding on the highways. Kind of lengthens up those gears, gives you a smoother ride. All right, so we've got some nice play in there. We also know that it's even going to tighten up just a little bit more as soon as we start to tighten down that axle nut. That's going to put it in the perfect place. It's that happy medium spot. We're setting that torque somewhere around 35 to 40, maybe even up to 45 foot-pounds. I'd say 40 is a nice number on that rear axle. Now, you'll notice our shifter came from the factory just a little bit low. We like to set those just slightly above the foot peg. Makes for an easier shifting. This can be based on your foot size or the type of riding shoe you're wearing. He's going to use a 10 millimeter to remove that pinch bolt. Slide the shifter off of the sprocket. It's splined. It goes on that spline shaft. He can adjust it up just a little bit. Rotate that up, slide it back on the splines, and you'll notice it doesn't go all the way in. That pinch bolt needs to go right through the little cutout section of the shaft. If you pull that lever all the way off, you'll see where I'm talking about. Make sure it's a nice fitment back in, and then we're going to torque down that pinch bolt. Another adjustment we'll make is to the rebound of the suspension. Both the front and rear suspension have rebound adjusters. He's using a flat head. We like to preset those. We'll run those all the way into a gentle seat and then back them out 1.5 turns. Just use a flathead screwdriver to do that. That was the rear, and we'll also do it on the front. Another adjustment I'm going to look at is that of the clutch lever and the cable tension. So I'll pull back the rubber protective boot, and I can see that I've got maybe 5 millimeters of free play, anywhere between 5 and 10, and you're okay. It's a little on the tight side, but we know that cable's gonna stretch out pretty quickly as it breaks in. But I do wanna verify that the locking nut is turned. I can kind of use that rubber boot to help me tighten that down a little bit. This is the adjuster, that's the locking nut. There's just one more thing to do, and that's take it for a test ride.